Okay, so today is November 7th, 8th, 2014. Okay, so we'll begin with homage to the Buddha 3 times. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so good morning, everybody. Okay, so today we come to Sutta number 120 in the Majjhima Nikaya. This is in Pali, it's called Sankhar Upapatti Sutta. And the translation, the title that was given by Bhikkhu Nyanamoli is Reappearance by Aspiration. But I don't particularly like Venerable Nyanamoli's rendering of Upapatti by reappearance. It seems to suggest that first one disappears in one place and then reappears someplace else. But the word upapatti is always used to signify what we would now call rebirth. And so I would now title this Rebirth by Aspiration, or Rebirth in accordance with one's aspiration. And originally I hoped to come to this sutta, according to the original schedule, is to come, well, in the same place after finishing the discourse on mindfulness of breathing, and then the discourse on mindfulness of the body, and then before we come to the 2 suttas on emptiness. But I thought it would come, according to the original schedule, while we are going from week to week, and it would serve as a little bit like a sort of light interlude between those heavy and more technical suttas. Because of my schedule of going to California, now it comes at the beginning, after a long interval of no classes. But it just struck me that maybe the compilers of the canon put this sutta here for the very same purpose, to give like a little break between those rather heavy and technical suttas, and to sort of lighten up the atmosphere a bit. Okay, and so this sutta is, so maybe you could say it is directed, unlike the others that come before it and after, which are directed sort of exclusively and intensely upon those who are seeking immediate liberation from the round of birth and death. This sutta is primarily directed for those who still feel themselves not yet ready to make the full endeavor to reach liberation, but are trying to work their way gradually from life to life as part of a gradual path to liberation. And so the Buddha, first he calls the attention of the monks, and then he says to the monks, I shall teach you. And then here we have Sankharupapatti, which is translated reappearance in accordance with one's aspiration. And one of the key words here in this phrase is sankhara. And the word sankhara, it has various uses in Buddhism. One of the most common uses is to signify all conditioned phenomena. That is, all the phenomena of mind and body all physical and mental phenomena that arise through the cooperative functioning of conditions. So anything that arises through causes and conditions is called a sankhara. But another meaning of the word sankhara, which is prominent in the formula for dependent origination, is specifically as volitional activity. That is the force of volition, or volition as a force that determines one's future destiny, particularly as the volitional activities that will generate the new consciousness in the next existence, and thereby set in motion the process of new existence, of repeated becoming. And I think that's the original meaning of sankhara here. That is, sankhara as a volitional activity which is going to determine rebirth. But the commentary to the sutta, from the broader commentary, the larger commentary to the Majjhima Nikaya, here glosses the word sankhara by another Pali word, patana, or Sanskrit, prarthana. Which can be translated as aspiration. And so it's common in Buddhist countries, in traditional Buddhist countries, for people to make particular patanas or aspirations to be reborn in particular realms of existence. Of course, very few Buddhists expect to reach final liberation right here and now. And even to reach liberation here and now, generally one has to do so through the force of one's aspiration. But many people make a patana or prarthana to be reborn in a particular realm of existence. Is this the case in Sri Lanka, Venerable Subodha? They use the word petuma. Yeah, so petuma is a singular form of Sanskrit prarthana.
Yes, we use prarthana too.
You use prarthana too. When people make the aspiration, I hear it at the end of dana offerings, well, actually at the beginning, may I be reborn in heaven after heaven after heaven. And then during the time of Maitreya Buddha, may I be reborn in a good family here on earth and come into contact with Maitreya Buddha and hear his teaching and realize the paths and fruits. Okay, but it's not enough to be reborn in accordance with one's aspiration. It's not enough just to have the aspiration or wish, but one also has to establish certain supporting conditions. So in this sutta, the Buddha is going to explain the supporting conditions for rebirth in various desirable and superior modes of rebirth. Okay, so he begins by saying that here, this is in paragraph 3, a bhikkhu possesses faith, virtue, learning, generosity, and wisdom. Then he thinks, "Oh, that on the dissolution or breakup of the body, after death, I might reappear, or better you could say, I may be reborn in the company of well-to-do nobles. These are the Khatiyas or Kshatriyas. So of course the Buddha is speaking to people in India, so he's formulating this in terms of the Indian class system. So in India, the social classes, or the society, was divided into 4 main social classes. In the Buddha's way of speaking, he puts the Kshatriyas, the nobles, the aristocrats, on top, and then in the second place he puts the Brahmins, the priests who preserve the Vedic traditions. But from the Brahmin perspective, when they formulate the class system, they put the Brahmins on top and the Kshatriyas in second place. They say that the Brahmins are born from the mouth of Brahma, whereas the Kshatriyas, the warriors, the aristocrats, the administrative class, are born from the arms and the chest of Brahma. And then the third social group in the Brahminic system are the Vaishyas, or in Pali, the Vasas. These are the merchants, business class, and the agriculturists, the landowners who owned land, cattle, other farm animals. And then the fourth social class, the lowest within the class system, are the Shudras, or in Pali, the Suddas. Those are the workers, the menial class, the servants, workers, manual workers. And then below the Shudras are those who are outside the class system. Those are the ones who are called the outcasts, now they're called the scheduled classes. So those would be people whose social status is so low that they're not even included within the class system. Those would be the people who are responsible for cleaning up the cesspits, the excretions, people who handle corpses, and people who are indigenous people who are not incorporated into the class system of mainstream Indian society. So that is the way Indian society was organized in the time of the Buddha. But the Buddha, he doesn't directly try to overthrow the caste system. He wasn't like a social revolutionary. But in a way, he implies a merging of many of the classes. Because when the Buddha speaks within his own frame of reference, he still speaks about the distinction between the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins, putting the Brahmins below the Kshatriyas. But then he groups everybody else together in the class of householders. So if one is not the Kshatriya or a Brahmin, then one is simply designated householder, whether one is a Vaishya, Sudra, or from the lower, those who are outside the class system. Okay, but the sort of more privileged classes would be the Kshatriyas, the Brahmins, and the wealthier householders. Okay, so the Buddha begins here with the Kshatriyas, the class of nobles or aristocrats. And so a bhikkhu might form the aspiration that after death I might be reborn in the company of well-to-do Kshatriyas. It seems a little suspicious to me that the Buddha would be telling a monk to aspire to be reborn in a family, even a family of aristocrats. Because normally monks who don't expect to reach liberation in this life form the aspiration, may I, in my next life, have sort of the primary aspiration is, may I have the opportunity to encounter the Buddha's teaching early in my life and have the opportunity to go forth and become a monk again. So maybe this monk is forming the aspiration to be reborn in a family of well-to-do kshatriyas and then have the opportunity to go forth and become a monk. Just like the Buddha was born into the kshatriya class, and then at the age of 29 he renounced and became an ascetic. Okay, so first one thinks in this way, or one forms the wish, such a wish, but now just having the occasional wish is not a powerful enough supporting factor. And so the Buddha continues and says, he fixes his mind on that, resolves upon it, and develops that wish. So in other words, in order for that wish to become strong enough, a strong enough factor, so that it might determine the mode of rebirth, one has to empower that wish by repeatedly turning the mind to it, by consciously formulating that aspiration, and by making it a kind of fixed determination within the mind. This is a little bit like if one wishes to dig or to create a path through the woods so that one can easily say that there's a house, a woods, and then there's a pond where one can go swimming or enjoy the scenery. It's not enough just once in a while you go through the woods in one place, another time you go through the woods in another place, another time you go through the woods in still a different place. But you have to keep on going through the woods in the same place each time, maybe with a machete through which one could cut away the thickets and the undergrowth. And in this way, one is creating, each time one goes, one is creating a wider and wider path through the woods, so that after some time, whenever one wants, one can go through without having to struggle with the undergrowth and the thickets and the thorns and the vines, but one can just walk easily through that woods and get to the pond. And so this is, in a way, it's like creating a groove within the mind, a groove which becomes stronger and stronger, so that it becomes a fixed, powerful determination. And so what will then happen at the time of death is that this determination will come to the surface of the mind, and it sort of mobilizes all the other forces within the mind. It becomes like a powerful karma determinant, and it will push or propel the stream of consciousness to a form of rebirth that corresponds to one's wish or aspiration. But for the aspiration to succeed, it needs sufficient supporting conditions. It's like trying to send up a rocket to outer space. So it's not enough just for maybe the NASA, the U.S. Space Agency, to build a rocket. But if the rocket is going to break the force of gravity and go into outer space and maybe send out an explorer which is going to reach Mars or some distant planet in order to explore it, the rocket needs, besides all of the design of the rocket ship and the inner projectile that will be sent into outer space, it needs fuel. If we don't give it sufficient fuel, the rocket won't be able to break the Earth's gravity, and it'll just come plunging back down to Earth. And so for the rocket of the aspiration to reach the particular destination, just like the rocket will reach Mars or Jupiter or Saturn in order to explore those planets. So just as the rocket needs sufficient amount of powerful fuel, so the mind needs sufficiently powerful supporting conditions. And those supporting conditions are provided by the particular virtues that one cultivates in the course of one's human life. And here the Buddha mentions 5 virtues, or 5 excellent qualities that are needed. These 5 good qualities are faith, virtue, learning, then the word is translated here, generosity and wisdom. And let's look at these a little bit, each of these. First, faith here doesn't mean simply what we call blind belief, but it means, I prefer to sort of gloss the word faith by trust and devotion. And so this, in the case of the monk, a bhikkhu, or could be a nun, a bhikkhuni, it will be faith in the sense of trust in the triple gem, in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, accompanied by spiritual devotion to the triple gem. And so you could say that faith encapsulates the emotional side of the spiritual life. And so faith is not just a matter of intellectual assent, or it's not just a conventional belief because if one is born in a Buddhist community, because everybody else accepts Buddhism. But this means that one has investigated the teaching, and so one appreciates the virtues of the Buddha, the excellent qualities of the Buddha. One has a deep devotion to the Dharma. One has respect and reverence for the Sangha. And one makes this faith and devotion one of the foundations and sort of centers of one's spiritual life. And then this is expressed through taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and in especially contemplating the excellent qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And so we have in the Buddha's text, the excellent qualities of the 3 jewels come down in the form of certain formulas. Like for the Buddha, we have the formula that goes, Iti Piso Bhagava, that he is the Blessed One, the Arahat, the perfectly enlightened one, the one who is endowed with knowledge and conduct, and so forth. Then we have the virtues of the Dharma summed up in the formula Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, that the Dharma is well proclaimed by the Blessed One, and then the virtues of the Sangha summed up in the formula Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho, and so forth, that the community of the Blessed One's disciples is practicing well, practicing properly, practicing the good path, practicing the systematic path, and so on. And so as the mind dwells on the virtues of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, it becomes suffused with trust, faith, and devotion. And that faith and devotion dedicated to the 3 jewels generates a great amount of wholesome karma or merit, which becomes one of the supports for rebirth in accordance with one's wish or aspiration. Then the second virtue here, or the second excellent quality mentioned, here is translated as virtue, which for me now seems too broad. but the Pali word is sila, which has the more specific meaning of virtuous behavior or good conduct, upright conduct. And so this will be conduct, well, in the broadest terms, not exclusively for a bhikkhu, but for any Buddhist follower, would be at minimum observing the 5 precepts. In the case of monks and nuns, there would be a broader code of precepts or training rules to follow. But the basic purpose of the training rules is to engender within oneself, within one's mind, the disposition towards virtuous types of behavior by abstaining from killing and instead developing kindness and compassion towards living beings, by abstaining from stealing and instead living honestly and in practicing contentment, being satisfied with simple things, living lightly, not demanding or expecting excess of material, of luxuries and conveniences. Then for a lay follower, abstaining from sexual misconduct, so remaining content with one's partner. And then for a monastic person, it means observing celibacy or complete sexual restraint. So this generates the force of purity within the mind. And then the 4th precept is abstaining from false speech, from deliberately telling lies. So this implants in the mind a commitment to truthful speech, to honesty in speech. Then the 5th precept is abstaining from the use of intoxicants, which the use of intoxicants in itself is not so unwholesome, but when one uses intoxicants, first it can create an addiction to them, and then somebody who comes under the influence of intoxicants can break any of the other precepts. So that's the minimal moral code, but then building on top of that, there are larger and wider codes of ethical behavior. So all of those are creating the force of virtuous behavior in the mind. Then comes the word, which is translated here as learning, which is literally, in Pali, it's Sutta, which means hearing. Because in the Buddha's time, in order to learn anything, one has to hear it spoken by a teacher. In the Buddha's time, there weren't printed books, and it's even doubtful whether writing was used at all. But after writing and the printing of books or the creation of books came into use, then the word sutta came to refer more broadly to extensive study especially of religious texts. And so the Buddha, in some places, the Buddha criticizes just mere learning without practice. For example, in the first chapter of the Dhammapada, the last 2 verses, he says that somebody who has extensive learning but doesn't put the learning into practice is like a man who counts the cows of others but doesn't own the cows himself. You know, if a farmer sees his neighbor has 30 cows and he can count them, 30 cows, he can't use those cows to get milk because they belong to his neighbor, not to himself. But somebody who has just a little bit of learning, puts it into practice, and then gets rid of greed, hatred, and delusion, that is like a farmer who possesses many cows. Okay, so even though the Buddha criticizes abundant learning without practice, but there are many other places where the Buddha praises learning as a virtuous quality within its own right. That is, if one acquires the learning in order to serve as a basis for practice and also as a kind of benefit that one could share with others in order to help others to learn and to practice the Dhamma. Okay, then the next quality is, the Pali word here is chaga, or Sanskrit tyaga. The word actually has two meanings, or two nuances. One nuance is that of generosity. So chaga we might consider to be the psychological counterpart of dana. The word dana means giving, and it refers most specifically to the actual act of giving, as well as to the object itself that is given. And then chaga is, as I said, the psychological counterpart of that. That is, it's the disposition to give. So in English we would render that as generosity. So a person who has chaga as a disposition of the mind would be one who is inclined to practice dana, to practice giving, and to give generously, to give abundantly. So that is one nuance of the word chaga, but the word has another nuance, which I think is more prominent in the Sanskrit counterpart tyaga, and that is relinquishment or renunciation. The ability to give up things that one cherishes, things to which one is inclined to cling. And so the emphasis here is not so much on giving things to others in order to help them, to benefit them, but on giving up the things to which one is attached in order to gain freedom from attachment. And so in the case of lay followers, chaga in the sense of generosity would be more prominent. In the case of monastics, chaga in the sense of relinquishment would be more prominent. But the two are not sort of exclusive, since lay people also practice relinquishment in order to live simply, for example, to resist the craving for material possessions and to give up excessive objects that they acquire. And monks, even though they might not have an abundance of material goods, but monks will give their fellow monastics, they'll give extra robes, food, special offerings that they might receive. And also giving the gift of the Dhamma by teaching the Dhamma is also an expression of generosity. Okay, so this is the practice of chaga, generosity, and relinquishment. And then the fifth, which is perhaps of the five the most important, is wisdom. This is panya, or insight, deep, penetrative insight into the Dhamma. But apparently here, the wisdom has not yet been developed to the level of reaching what's called the paths and the fruits, that is, the stages of realization, except for the very last one in the sutta. Otherwise, I think the Buddha wouldn't express this in terms of an aspiration to be reborn in other higher realms of existence. Okay, so this passage mentions two things necessary to be reborn in accordance with one's aspiration. One is possession of these 5 virtuous qualities, these 5 excellent qualities. The general word used in Pali for excellent qualities or virtues is guna. And so guna is distinct from sila, which is virtuous behavior. The guna is what's translated into Chinese as gongde. And I think maybe the Chinese translators use gongde because it sounds a little bit like the Pali Sanskrit word guna. Because gong by itself means something like effort, doesn't it? And then gongde, de is virtue. So gongde is effort at virtue. Okay, so the two things one needs to be reborn according to one's aspiration. One is possession of the 5 gunas, 5 excellent qualities. And then the other is a strong, fixed determination. A determination which has been fixed in the mind, frequently resolved upon, and developed. If one has the virtuous qualities but doesn't form the aspiration, then one will simply be reborn in accordance with one's karma, but not in any definite place, in any definite mode of rebirth. If one has the strong aspiration but doesn't have a sufficient collection of supporting conditions by way of the virtues. In fact, if one sort of neglects all of these virtues but just has a strong aspiration, then all we can say is tough luck. Maybe this is the common in the Buddhist societies. You know, the guy says, he goes to religious functions and everybody is reciting, may I be reborn in the Tusita heaven and meet the Bodhisattva Maitreya there. And then when he goes out of the temple, he goes drinking, and then he leaves his wife and goes to his girlfriend, and then he goes hunting and fishing. Or gets involved in dishonest business deals, which deprive his competitor of a fair chance of success. And then he goes back to the temple and may I be reborn in Tusita heaven and meet Maitreya Bodhisattva. When he passes away, where is he going to be reborn? It's like building a very beautiful rocket ship. And they put water or kerosene in the fuel tank, and then they light it, and it's just going to burn up, and the rocket will collapse. Okay, so he fixes his mind on that, resolves upon it, develops it. Okay, so then the Buddha says, these aspirations and this abiding of his, I think by the abiding of his means frequently dwelling in faith, virtue, learning, generosity, and wisdom, thus developed and cultivated, lead to his rebirth there. So this is the path, the way that leads to reappearance or to rebirth there. What does this note say? Okay, it just says the way is the 5 qualities together with the aspiration. Okay, so this is for rebirth in the company of well-to-do kshatriyas or aristocrats. Then come the next 2 passages are concerned with rebirth in the company of well-to-do Brahmins and the company of well-to-do householders. Okay, next passage is concerned with... Now what follows in the sutta is going to take us on a kind of tour through the different realms of existence, the higher realms of existence, in the Buddhist picture of the cosmos or universe. So now we come to so these are the first paragraphs deal with a favorable or a fortunate rebirth in the human realm. The next paragraphs are concerned with a favorable rebirth in the 6 heavens of the sense sphere. And to get some idea of what is being discussed here, maybe we have to map out a little bit the Buddhist cosmos. Okay, this is a very rough and broad picture of the Buddhist cosmos. And so we have 3 realms of existence. These are the sensual realm, or sometimes it's called the desire realm. And this is subdivided into the bad destinations and the good destinations. Those of you who came for the Abhidhamma course and you have the Abhidhamma book, you have a chart showing this in detail in the comprehensive manual of Abhidhamma, so you don't have to worry about taking notes on this unless you want to reinforce your memory. Okay, so the bad destinations are usually mentioned 3 bad destinations. That is the hell realm, the realm of the animals, the animal kingdom, and then the realm of the afflicted spirits, sometimes called hungry ghosts. And then in the sensual realm, there are 2 good destinations. One is the human realm. Sometimes it's hard to believe that the human realm is a good destination because there's a lot of misery in the human realm. And then there are 6 heavenly realms of the sense sphere. 6 sense realm heavens. Those will be mentioned here as we go through the sutta. Then above the sensual realm comes the form realm, which is divided into 4 basic layers, and each one has a number of subdivisions. And the form realm is entered through or attained through the jhanas, through the meditative absorption. And then above the form realm is the formless realm, which is attained through the formless meditative attainments. And that has 4 subdivisions. And then beyond all of the realms of existence is the unconditioned state or the transcendent state, which is nibbana, the state of ultimate liberation. Okay, so now the Buddha is going to explain how, according to one's aspiration, one might be reborn in the 6 sense sphere heavenly realms. And so he starts off with the lowest of these heavenly realms. This is called the heaven of the 4 great kings, the Chatu Maharajika Devas. So somebody might hear that the Devas, the gods in this realm, are long-lived, beautiful, and enjoy great happiness. And so he forms an aspiration to be, or a wish to be reborn in that realm. Then he turns that wish into an aspiration, fixes it in the mind, and then he has sufficient virtuous qualities, and so he can be reborn there. And then the same thing is said about the next, or the other 5 heavens of the sensory realm. There's the Tavatingsa heaven, the heaven of the 33. This is presided over by Sakka, the king of the gods. Sakka is a kind of Buddhist metamorphosis of the Vedic deity Indra, the ruler of the gods. Then come the Yama Devas. Not very much is said about them actually in the Buddhist texts. It's a bit puzzling. Then comes the Tusita heaven. This is supposed to be the heaven presided over by the Bodhisattva who's going to be the next Buddha, Maitreya or Maitreya. And some of the Buddha's eminent lay disciples were reborn in the Tusita heaven, like Anathapindika and Visakha, great generous lay disciple, woman lay disciple. Then the gods who delight in creating, in creation. And then the gods who wield power over the creation of others. And now, to be reborn in these heavenly worlds, it's said in some other suttas, the supporting conditions are a very high level of development of generosity or giving and of virtuous behavior, that is, of sila, of good conduct. But the meditative development doesn't have to reach the level of the jhanas to be reborn in those realms. I think somebody who practices the meditation, for example, recollection of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, meditation on the three jewels, or who practices the four divine abode meditations, the Brahma Viharas, without reaching the level of jhana, will be developing very powerful, wholesome qualities of mind. And those wholesome qualities of mind will be the kind of psychological counterpart of the devas in those realms. So naturally, one's mind will tend to gravitate towards the realm that corresponds to one's level of mental development. So somebody who has an abundance of faith and devotion to the triple gem, or who has an abundance of loving kindness and compassion, altruistic joy, will tend, but without reaching the level of jhanic absorption, will tend to be reborn in these realms. If somebody practices the meditation on maybe even the kasina meditation or mindfulness of breathing without reaching jhana, perhaps that will lead also to this realm. But even somebody who doesn't actually have a formal meditation practice, but still has very high development of generosity, virtuous behavior, and through the observance of sila, develop strong dispositions towards kindness, compassion, helpfulness to others, the mind will tend to be reborn in that realm. But in order to be more certain of being reborn in one of those realms, one would have to, or one should, fix the aspiration on being reborn there. If not, then it's possible that just because one's been a human being with many natural human dispositions, the mind might tend back into the human realm. Okay, before we go further, maybe at this point I'll ask whether there's any questions. Yes, please.
Not so much a question, but I see...
It's good if you take the microphone.
Oh, sure. Like this? Is that okay?
Yeah, this is good. Yeah.
Closer? Okay. Oh, thank you, Stephen. I see a comparison or a parallel with Pure Land teaching in the sense that in the Pure Land Sutras, it always states, we always see the statement that aspiration to the Pure Land along with the keeping of the precepts. Yeah, so that's so that is, definitely the case. If I remember in the Pure Land, there's sort of 3 steps: faith, vow, and practice. Are those the 3 steps? Somebody who knows the Pure Land. Okay, so faith means that one has faith in the vows of Amitabha Buddha or Amitabha, that supposedly Amitabha Buddha has made the vow that those who recite his name and pay homage to him with pure faith can be reborn in Sukhavati, the land of happiness, the pure land. So one needs faith, then one has to have the vow to be reborn there. So that corresponds to the aspiration. And then the practice would be, well, usually it's understood as the recitation of the name. But of course, for the recitation to be effective, it has to be supported by virtuous qualities, including the observance of the silas, precepts. Your name is?
I am Deborah.
Okay, Deborah. Okay.
I keep pondering why any of the bhikkhus that the Buddha is addressing, or any of us, would want to aspire to rebirth in anything less than total deliverance from the high state. What would motivate, or what was the Buddha possibly thinking that people would want to be reborn into other different, or possibly lower?
Yeah, actually, this is a good point. And now somebody who is following the Buddha's teaching would not be aspiring to rebirth, say, into these heavenly realms taken as a final goal in itself. They would still, because they have panya, or wisdom, so they have an understanding of the teaching, which means that they would understand that Nibbana is the state of ultimate deliverance, and so their ultimate goal would be Nibbana. But, and this is probably the case with the great majority of both monastics and lay people today, they don't see that they have sufficiently strong, wholesome roots or wholesome qualities to reach Nibbana right in this present life. And so as a kind of temporary way station, they'll be aspiring to be reborn in a good destination in order to meet suitable conditions for continuing the practice up to the point where they can reach liberation. And now there's sometimes a misunderstanding. Your question reminds me of a common misunderstanding amongst Buddhists, that it's only possible to practice the Dharma and to make progress in the human realm, and that the heavenly realms are sort of just pleasant detours which are useless in terms of the ultimate goal. I think this is a misunderstanding based upon the statement that a person will only achieve Buddhahood only in the human realm, which is a statement which is made in the text. And that is the case because the human realm, you see, when a person achieves Buddhahood, that person doesn't have the teaching of the Dharma already available to them. So they have to discover the Dhamma on their own without any external guidance, without a path that's already mapped out for them. And so in order to achieve Buddhahood, they have to realize the Four Noble Truths. And so for that to be possible, they have to be reborn. It said that they have to be reborn into a realm in which there is a balance of, or some admixture of pleasure and pain, happiness and suffering. If they're reborn in the lower realms, then there's too much suffering there, so they can't realize the truth there and gain liberation. And if they're reborn in one of the heavenly realms, there's too much happiness there, so they can't discover the Dhamma of liberation there. Okay, so that is the case for somebody to achieve Buddhahood. That is, to discover the Dhamma in a period when it doesn't exist in the world. But it's the case that when the Dhamma is made known in the world, when it's proclaimed, when it's available, then the beings who are in the heavenly world can hear the Dhamma and achieve even the stages of realization within the heavenly realms, even up to arhatship. So it's said, for example, if you look at the first discourse of the Buddha, a passage which is often left out when people are giving a summary of the first discourse, is the very long passage which comes at the end, where when the Buddha is speaking, each group of devas, starting from the earth-dwelling devas, then going up through each successive deva realm, up to the highest Brahma realms, gives out the shout that the unsurpassed wheel of the Dharma has been set in motion by the Blessed One in the deer park at Benares, a wheel that cannot be stopped by any ascetic Brahman, Deva, Mara, Brahma, or anyone in the world. And then it's said in the commentaries that these devas and brahmas, many of them achieve the Dhamma Chakku, the eye of Dhamma, the insight into the true Dhamma by listening to the Buddha's discourse. Okay, and so those who don't expect to reach liberation within this life can still form the aspiration. They know that they're going to be reborn someplace within samsara, and so they certainly don't want to be reborn in the lower realms where they don't have any chance to practice the Dhamma. And so one forms the aspiration to be reborn in some realm corresponding to the level of one's practice, to be reborn in some realm where one has the opportunity to encounter the Dhamma again and to continue the practice. And so you see, sometimes even at the end of the commentaries, the commentators who have to be very learned and knowledgeable to write these commentaries, and also have very good qualities because they're practicing the Dhamma. They form the aspiration, may I be reborn. Usually they form the aspiration to be reborn in the Tusita Deva world, and then to come back into the human realm at the time when Metteyya arises in the world, and then usually to go forth as a monk and to hear the Dhamma, and then to achieve the final fruit, the fruit of liberation, through the teaching of Maitreya. Of course, one would think that they could also form the aspiration to achieve the final fruit under Gautama Buddha. Okay, any further questions? Okay, this is...
One thing, what you just explained about the realms, does that apply to the formless realms also?
Yeah, that's the good point. In fact, I was thinking that when I was explaining. Now, somebody who hasn't reached the stage of stream entry, if they are reborn in the formless realm, they cannot reach any path or fruit there. And the reason is, in order to reach the first stage of realization, the stage of stream entry, they have to realize it through hearing the Dhamma. They have to have learned the Dhamma by hearing. And the beings in the formless realm don't have bodies, which means they don't have ears or the faculty of hearing. So they can't hear the Dhamma in the formless realm. And so a person who hasn't reached the first stage of realization cannot reach the first stage in the formless realm. But somebody who has reached the first stage of realization, or any higher stage short of arhatship, can aspire to be reborn in the formless realm and be reborn there. But now, because they've reached stream entry, they have the experiential correct view of the Dhamma. And so they're able to carry on the practice independently of any teacher. And so they can be reborn in the formless realm, and now they have the world-transcending Noble Eightfold Path. And so they can use that world-transcending path in order to continue to cultivate and to reach arhatship in the formless realm, to reach final liberation in the formless realm. And that question reminds me, or makes me think of another answer to Debbie's question, that these instructions here can be directed not only to those who don't expect to reach a path and fruit in this life itself, but also for those who have reached the lower paths and fruits, but don't think that they're able to reach arhatship in this life. And so they're going to take a rebirth someplace. And so now they're forming the aspiration to be reborn in a particular realm where, since they've reached at least the first path and fruit, once they take rebirth, they're going to have access to the Dhamma, even inner access to the Dhamma. But now, being reborn under suitable conditions, now they can continue their practice up to the stage of final realization. Is that clear? So having reached, say, the first or second path by which they're still going to be reborn amongst human beings or the sense sphere devas, so now they form the aspiration to be reborn under particular conditions in the human realm or in one or another of the realms of the sense sphere devas in order to continue the practice up to the higher paths and fruits. Okay, now we come to the rebirth into the higher realms. So again, the Buddha starts off by mentioning the 5 prerequisites from faith to wisdom. And then the monk hears about the Brahma of 1,000. These are different, what's going to take place in this section, the following sections, are the different layers of Brahmas. You see, the form realm is divided or subdivided into 4 realms or 4 planes which correspond to the levels of the 4 jhanas. And so those who achieve the first jhana and master that jhana will be reborn in the lowest plane of the form realm. And that plane is subdivided into 3 levels, which are not dealt with here. But I assume what's being spoken of here are those beings at the top level of those 3 at the lowest level. Those are the Brahmas, the Mahabrahmas. And those Brahmas differ in their power, the extent of their sovereignty, according to the size of their world systems. So we start off at the lowest level of the Brahmas who are ruling over a world system of 1,000 worlds. Okay, so he hears that these Brahmas are long-lived, beautiful, and enjoy great happiness. And then he hears that the Brahma of 1,000 abides, pervading a world system of 1,000 worlds. And he abides, resolved on pervading the beings that have been reborn there. The commentary explains what's meant by pervading, 5 kinds of pervading. I think what's important is that he's able to pervade all of these worlds with the light, with his aura, with his glory. And to know the minds of the beings in 1,000 worlds, to see them, those beings, with his divine eye, to pervade them with his light, the light of his glory, and pervasion of the body, which means extending one's bodily aura to 1,000 worlds. Actually, pervasion of light means being able to extend the light to those 1,000 worlds, and then with that light to see the worlds and to see all of the beings dwelling in those worlds. And then pervasion of body means to extend one's bodily aura or one's radiance to 1,000 worlds. Okay, so the monk hears that the Brahma of 1,000 enjoys such glory, and then he forms the aspiration, fixes his mind on that, and then if his supporting conditions are sufficient, then he will be reborn in accordance with the aspiration. However, to be reborn in accordance with one's aspiration, in addition to those 5 qualities mentioned, one also needs the first jhana, and to achieve mastery over the first jhana. Because rebirth in the Brahma world, that's part of the form realm, which is beyond the sense sphere realm. And to break the barrier which separates the sense sphere realm from the form realm, one needs the attainment of the jhana, the first jhana. Okay, then the next paragraphs deal with more elevated, more powerful Brahmas. So the Brahma who presides over a world system of 2,000 worlds, a world system of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 worlds. Then we go down paragraph 17, a Brahma who presides over a world system of 10,000 worlds. Then paragraph 18, the Brahma who presides over a world system of 100,000 worlds. Maybe we could see these if we think of galaxies with different numbers of solar systems within them. And if we think of each solar system, well, that doesn't quite work out, because any galaxy has, I'd say a galaxy will have many more than 1,000 solar systems. Let's not try to make exact parallels between ancient Buddhist cosmology and modern cosmology. So just think of it in terms of ancient Indian cosmology, but we could think of a world system as like a galaxy, and within that galaxy there are a certain number of worlds, say worlds with intelligent life, and those would be the worlds that constitute that galaxy. Okay, and so each of these is a higher and more powerful level of a Brahma, who is the king, the presiding deity over these world systems. And so to be reborn in successively higher world systems, one would need successively more powerful development of the 5 virtues and a stronger development of the jhana. But all of these levels of the different Brahmas are taking place within the sphere that corresponds still to the first jhana. Because when we come to the next passage, starting with 19, now we come with the gods of radiance, the gods of limited radiance, the gods of immeasurable radiance, and the gods of streaming radiance. Those are the realms, or those are the planes within the form realm that correspond to the second jhana. And according to this gets a little technical, according to classical Buddhist cosmology, the gods of radiance don't constitute one separate plane, but that's just a general term for the gods of the next 3 planes, the gods of limited radiance, the gods of immeasurable radiance, and the gods of streaming radiance. So there seems to be a little bit of a disagreement here between the cosmology in the Buddha Sutta and the later systematic form of cosmology, which eliminates gods of radiance as a separate realm, and as I said, just treats it as a general term for the gods of the three fixed planes of limited radiance, immeasurable radiance, and streaming radiance. So those three are taken to be the three planes that correspond to the second jhana. Then come three planes, then come the planes that correspond, the planes of the gods that correspond to the third jhana. Those are the gods of glory, gods of limited glory, gods of immeasurable glory, and gods of refulgent glory. So in the suttas we have 4 planes, but in the developed Buddhist cosmology of the Abhidharma and the commentaries, the gods of glory are interpreted to be not a separate plane, but just a general term for the gods of the 3 planes, the gods of limited glory, the gods of immeasurable glory, the gods of refulgent glory. And those are the 3 subplanes that correspond, those are the names for the 3 subplanes or subdivisions that correspond to the third jhana. So those who reach the third jhana and have the requisite excellent qualities can be reborn in those planes. Then for the 4th jhana, we have 1 plane that corresponds to the 4th jhana for those who are either worldlings or stream enterers or once returners. And this is called the gods of great fruit. So those, whether one is a worldling, a stream enterer, a once returner, if one has the 4th jhana and the supporting qualities, the 5 supporting qualities, then one can be reborn in the realm of great fruit. Now those who become non-returners, that is, who reach the 3rd fruit of or 3rd stage of realization, the 3rd fruit of the path, those will be reborn in what are called the pure abodes. These are realms reserved for non-returners. Only non-returners can be reborn in those realms. And in those realms, non-returners achieve arhatship. So those realms can be populated by non-returners or by arahats, not by anybody else. And there are 5 of these planes which make up the pure abodes. Those are the Aviha gods, the Atapa gods, the Sudasa gods, the Sudasi gods, and the Akanita gods. Okay, so somebody who has reached, as a human being who has reached the 3rd stage of realization, can then make the aspiration to be reborn in one or another of the pure abodes. And if they have the strong aspiration and sufficient supporting qualities, they'll be reborn there. And it's said that these 5 levels of the pure abodes are distinguished by the dominant spiritual faculty. That is, starting from the lowest, the Aviha gods have for them the strong faculty is that of faith. For the Atapa gods, the strong faculty is energy. For the Sudasa gods, Actually, it should go in the opposite direction. No, maybe it goes this way. For the Suddhasa gods, the strong faculty is mindfulness. For the Suddhasi gods, the strong faculty is samadhi. And for the Akanita gods, the strong faculty is that of wisdom. But that is said in maybe a sub-commentary, so I don't know how authoritative it is. Okay, now the next passage takes us for those who are aspiring to rebirth in the formless realms. And this, according to Osman's question, seems a little bit strange to me, that somebody would be aspiring to rebirth in one of the formless realms unless they've reached some stage of realization as a human being. Because if they're reborn in the formless realm, then, and they haven't achieved any stage of realization, then they have to spend so many aeons. Of course, they enjoy there the peace, the equanimity, the serenity of those realms. But after that period of time comes to an end, then they come back either into one of the Deva realms or the human realm, empty-handed, so to speak. They don't have any realization. And notice in the description of the gods of these realms, it says that they are long-lived, long-enduring, and enjoy great happiness. But one word is dropped out of the description. What is the word? From the description of the other deities?
Beauty?
What is that? Beautiful. Because they don't have physical bodies, so they can't be described as beautiful. Instead, it said that they're long-lived, long-enduring, and enjoy great happiness. Okay, but the Buddha is explaining even the path that leads to rebirth in those realms, even though those realms are in a sense a dead end. Richard?
Is there a difference between long-lived and long-enduring?
I think that that's just a synonym, I think, so that each realm will have three descriptive terms.
But what I was thinking is kind of an odd synonym, because enduring normally is transitive. You endure something, namely you endure pain, suffering, travail, and so on. And there wouldn't be anything to endure.
I think maybe that's the fault of the English word. I think the Pali word is chiratayi, long-lasting, one might say.
Okay.
It's not enduring in the sense of having patience to endure difficulties. Okay, so that takes us through rebirth in the formless realm. Formless realm with its four planes. Okay, then in the last paragraph, we finally come to the ultimate goal of the Buddha's teaching. So here the monk possesses faith, virtue, learning, generosity or relinquishment, and wisdom. And then he thinks, oh, that by realizing for myself with direct knowledge I might here and now enter and abide in the liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the asavas. And then, so he forms that aspiration, and then by realizing it for himself with direct knowledge, he here and now enters and dwells in the liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the asavas. And then the Buddha says, this monk is not reborn anywhere at all. Okay, and then that takes us to the end of the sutta. So any questions on the sutta or any comments? Yes,
If they're not reborn anywhere,
mm-hmm.
then where are they?
Yeah, please take please take the microphone.
If they're not reborn anywhere,
Yeah.
then it's nothingness, nowhere, empty.
It's empty in a sense, but it means that they achieve what's called the nibbana element without residue. Yeah.
So they're born in nirvana then.
It's not a state of rebirth, because rebirth implies that.
Mind?
Excuse me.
It's a state of mind.
Well, after achieving the final nibbana, the continuum, you see, what we call body and mind are just a process of bodily events or physical events that constitute the body and mental events that constitute the mind. And so what we think of as myself is just this continuous process of co-arisen process of bodily and mental events arising and passing away. And so with the attainment of final nibbana, then there's no more arising of body and mind. But it doesn't mean, we think of it from the Western standpoint, if there's no body and mind there, it must be nothingness, just complete zero. But from the Buddha standpoint, what lies beyond body and mind is the state of ultimate freedom, peace, bliss, serenity. Even though bliss and serenity are usually mental experiences, but this is something which transcends mental experiences. This is nirvana or nibbana, the state of liberation.
No more suffering.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
The immaterial world, are they physical location or is it some kind of mind state accessible to the meditator? Say if someone who's in the middle of a formless meditation.
Okay, if somebody as a human being, achieves a formless meditative absorption, they still have the physical body, and that their mind is within the meditative absorption of that state. Say, the attainment of boundless consciousness, the state of boundless consciousness. So as a human being, they still have the body, but as they're sitting there in meditation, the mind is in the state of boundless consciousness. Now, when they pass away, there's no physical plane called the base of boundless consciousness, because it's a formless realm, which means it's a non-physical realm. But it is a particular realm of existence. So what happens is that the mind occurs at the level of that realm. And we call the mind which arises there a new being. So we say that this being has passed away from the human state and been reborn in the base of boundless consciousness, or the base of infinite consciousness. And so that being is now existing just as a stream of mind, a stream of mental events at the level of the base of boundless consciousness. But because that base is non-physical, it doesn't exist, it doesn't have any physical location. But within this scheme of cosmology, it is a particular plane of existence.
So if it has no physical base, how come it's still not accessible to the meditator during meditation?
Well, it's not that the base itself is accessible, but the base, the plane of rebirth, is the counterpart of the meditative attainment called the base of infinite consciousness. And so the base of infinite consciousness, while one is attaining that, is generating, let's say that the mind in the base of infinite consciousness is occurring at the level that corresponds to that particular plane of existence. or to use somewhat metaphorical expression, it's occurring at the vibrational frequency of that plane of existence. So because the mind is now becoming sort of habituated to that frequency level, when that meditator passes away, then the body drops away, but the mind will now go on to occur at that vibrational frequency. And that is expressed by saying that the being is reborn in that plane of existence. And so even for us as human beings, I would say within the cosmology, the human realm and even our whole physical universe doesn't have a physical location within a larger physical universe, but our consciousness is occurring at a vibrational frequency that manifests to us this particular physical universe in which we're situated. If we were to change, if our level of the vibrational frequency of our consciousness were to change, say one were to go around murdering people ruthlessly, heartlessly, then one would be generating a karma that will lead to the hell realm. And so when that person dies, then the vibrational frequency of consciousness will be occurring at the level of the hell realm. So what will manifest is what would manifest physically is the hell realm. And so the person will see themselves in hell, tormented by tormentors. They'll see other beings in hell. And that's because their consciousness and the consciousness of the other beings in hell are occurring at the hell, the infernal level of the infernal frequency level. If one does very good deeds, very wholesome deeds, so one is to be reborn in heaven, then what manifests in one of the 6 sense-sphere heavens, then what manifests is a heavenly realm that corresponds to the vibrational frequency of the consciousness. Or the consciousness occurs at such a vibrational frequency as to manifest at the physical level this particular heavenly realm. I think we should stop now and we could come back, let's say 12:30, and have then some discussion if we want to discuss this further. So let us end with sharing of the merits. Okay, so we can share the merits these are to some of the other beings that inhabit our realm of existence, or maybe some in the lower Deva worlds who can share in the merits, rejoice in the merits, and thereby share in our merits. So, Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanang Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanang Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang Etavatacham Hehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Devanumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya. We'll do it the short way. Sabbe Bhutanumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya. Sabbe Satanumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya. Bhavagupadaya avici hetato etantare satakayupapanna rupya rupicha asanya sanino dukkha pamuchantu Pusantu Nibuting. Okay, we could end with 3 half bows to the Buddha.
Sankharupapatti.